netrootsradio.com presents
David Waldman.
Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Okay, well, we'll try and do it this time with the microphone on. Hello, everybody, from inside the echo chamber, the literal echo chamber, I guess, in which this was recorded. Thanks, by the way, very much, Tom, for jumping out of your weekend and helping us out with the new announces, and we'll perhaps spend some time explaining what's going on gently at some point. How you doing, everybody? It is Wednesday, October 7th, 2020. Time for yet another show. It's debate day for the vice presidential candidates, allegedly. I don't see where they're making any preparations for this debate to go on, though. They have a stage, they've got a venue, they've set the stage, and I gotta tell you, from the photo circulated by Jeff Bennett of NBC News, the White House correspondent, I gotta tell you, Kamala Harris should essentially not agree to tonight's debate as it's currently set up. As you know, Mike Pence comes to the debate from inside the epicenter of the Washington, D.C. based, but nationwide, Trump cluster. And yeah, it seems like there's a word missing from that phrase. He's been spreading the disease wherever he has gone. I don't know where he picked it up, but wherever he got it from is awfully dangerous as well. In the meantime, he's been spreading it around like wildfire. And the numbers inside the White House are atrocious. It's a difficult place to work in and not catch a respiratory disease that's airborne. It's a warren of tiny little office spaces that are just cramped too close together all over the place. And as a result, for instance, with some of the things we're seeing that are indicators of just how bad it is, Washington, D.C. has seen its daily new case count skyrocket. They were doing numbers in the in the teens and perhaps low 20s every once in a while for a very, relatively small population of 700-something thousand in D.C. And it had been relatively stable for some time. As a matter of fact, before I go too far into it, I guess I can go and take a look at their... Let me take a look at their chart, like I'm a doctor here. I'll pretend I'm doing that. And we'll take a look at the D.C. charts here and see if we can lend some legitimacy to what we're calling off the top of our heads here. The daily case counts. Right. They've actually been somewhat higher of late, but when they were doing well with their population of how much? Dang. Too bad. I resorted this thing. Here we go. 705,000, just over 705,000 living inside the district. According to Worldometers, which kind of updates the latest estimates, even in between census measurements. So actually, somewhat higher case counts than I recall. I guess back in their, at the best of times, they were doing in the 20s. But I guess through, say, mid to late September, they've been hovering between the high 20s and the high 40s with occasional spikes over 50 in the low 50s. And then I guess when all the people, when news broke that it was circulating everywhere in the White House and people began to get tested, their daily case count for October 6th, yesterday, spiked to 105. And it's probably the highest it's been since, well, let's see. Somebody said as much, but I guess it hasn't been 105 or higher since June 3rd, when they hit 130. That was on the downside of the big node of the, the wave. And I guess it hit 130, and then the next day it was 104. So almost it would have moved it forward a day, June 4th. And then from there, it's just downwards into a trough, and then a slow mini wave through the end of July and August, and it kind of settled down into a flat line for a while, and then boing, straight up once it entered the White House, and the president, with his foolish policies of mask denialism and, in fact, germ theory denialism, simply spread it all over the place. And then, of course, insisted on doing events everywhere. Now, what we saw on camera were his outdoor events, the giant rallies that he held all over the country and probably claimed were safe because outdoors. And, of course, we now know the results of his claims of, well, everyone who comes in or comes near me anyway gets tested. And so, therefore, they very foolishly relied very heavily on these rapid tests, which, as we've learned many times from Greg, are the least accurate. They serve a purpose, but they're not terribly accurate in terms of, like, what you shouldn't do with them is say, everyone here passed that rapid test. Great. Masks off, and we all, let's play spit paintball and just throw germs at each other all day. And do all the things that we're admonished not to do, whether we're masked or not. We're told no shaking hands, no hugging, no close proximity, no shouting when they're not close, don't get close and talk. All of this stuff with the rapid test, I would say if you're meeting outdoors and you pass the rapid test, keep the masks on if you're going to be chatting and put some distance between yourselves and don't touch. But they seem to think that the rapid tests are licensed to do whatever you want. Roman orgy is fine if you just pass the rapid test. So in addition to these large outdoor rallies, apparently never one to waste a trip and skip a party, I guess. Donald Trump has apparently, mostly unknown to the rest of us, been holding indoor fundraisers and parties all over the place. Wherever he goes for a rally, he doesn't just do the rally and take off and go home all the time. In Minneapolis, I see news this morning that there are 13 restaurant workers now in quarantine, although I'm not certain whether that means that they are doing it out of an abundance of caution because they were near Trump, or someone in the restaurant is sick after being near Trump. Which would tend to indicate isolation. But I guess they have to have a test first. But they were at catering a party Trump attended on September 30th. So people now are doing their backwards tracing, and it's finding out that it's not just Washington, D.C. that's spiking. It's that he's left a trail of germs all over the place, which is another one of those reasons why you were supposed to stay at home. They weren't punishing you. They weren't sending you to your room. The idea was everywhere you went was a potential trail of germs, and you would only find out too late if you had been spreading it all over the place. So if you weren't frivolously traveling all around the country, and if you weren't holding mass events, then there was probably little reason to worry. However, they were doing both, and now there's a lot of reason to worry. And now Kamala Harris, let me refine the A on that. Kamala Harris has to worry about that tonight. Pence comes out of that epicenter refusing any plexiglass shielding because he's such a Superman or something like that. And so the setup that they have now for these two is desks that I assume they put the desks 6 feet apart. It looks like they could be maybe 6 feet apart. And then these very simple and small plexiglass shields near each desk, but just not in front and nothing between them and the moderator, but two shields that might rise perhaps a foot over their head when seated. Totally inadequate to the job. And they're going to have to demand more. And I don't know who settled on this, but this ought to be the last set of debates ever facilitated by this Commission on Presidential Debates. They're terrible. They are no improvement whatsoever over the League of Women Voters, who I think, frankly, did a better job putting these debates together. But then partisanship made things, I think, spin out of control. And no one was not no one. The Republicans refused to trust the League of Women Voters to set up a fair debate. They came up with this stupid commission, and now they're just like, you should have the debate in the gas chamber. Everybody just do that. And they apparently have no one on staff there who will insist on keeping people who are running for president and vice president safe for 30 more days so that they can finish the election and, have some time to recover and survive until Inauguration Day. I don't know who did it, but they're out. They're fired, to borrow the phrase that Trump himself will never utter these days now that he's in the White House. All right, medical issues. We brought a doctor. I haven't let him say a word yet. Now it's his turn to speak uninterrupted for an hour. Sir, your rebuttal. Good morning, Greg.
So long as you don't invoke cloture on me, I guess we're okay. You know,
Yes.
it's funny. The Washington, D.C. outbreak isn't necessarily associated with the White House outbreak. From what I've been reading, part of the problem is part of the bigger Trump problem.
It's
In that
huge.
I'm not sure the White House has notified anybody.
Yes, that's
So
true.
therefore, it may not be included in the statistics. This may be more related to school opening. And there may be an even bigger Washington outbreak we don't know yet because the White House isn't reporting anything, isn't asking CDC to do contact tracing, doesn't want you to know that Trump never really was tested every day, and in fact may not have been tested at all. So you can't believe a thing. They lie like mattresses there. So anything that comes out of the White House in terms of information is suspect. And that's one of the reasons why we have to be careful with
I thought it might be
Kamala and
staffers.
with Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
But Pence probably doesn't have coronavirus. I can't say the same thing about Rudy Giuliani, who coughed his way through a Fox News presentation. And in fact, everybody who went to the tiny room clustered together debate prep for Trump
Yeah.
are the people who are getting sick. And, you know, I don't think Pence was there. I think it's fair to say, and I don't mean this as a double entendre, but it's true in both ways.
Okay.
I don't think Pence is close to Trump.
Okay.
I don't think they're close in terms of
No.
liking each other, and I don't think they're
think
close in
that's
terms of distance.
Yeah, well, not very often, I don't think. And there was an event recently where they put them extremely far apart at
Yeah,
separate
the Saturday,
lecterns,
September
but-
26th, was the Rose Garden thing, and then the following Monday, 2 days later, I think they had an event where they were both there, and I don't know where it was. I think something like Trump was in Washington and Pence was in New Jersey, and so you couldn't see each other because the podia were just so far apart.
Oh, yeah. Well, they
It was
did have one of those.
25 feet apart, something like that. Some real, like, why are they doing this?
Yeah.
And, of course, the speculation is, well, that's because Trump already knew he was sick.
Yeah, that's possible too. I did see that one. However, in the interim, I have seen photos from the all-indoor Gold Star Families reception, which was news to me until Joan mentioned it to me yesterday, and that I think was Sunday, the day after the Amy Coney Barrett introduction. Many of the same players present there, an all-indoor ceremony. Pence is visible right there in the front row.
Sure.
And pictures taken with all of the Gold Star families and Trump and Melania, and shoulder to shoulder and thumbs up and hugs and everything. And so, you know, support the troops, kill their families. Seems
Right.
to be
And then
the
we
order of
also
the day.
have, you know, as far as the senators go, we have a Tuesday through Thursday Senate lunch where they all get together. So there may be
this
several
week.
super spreader events, but Trump wasn't at that. On the other hand, Ron Johnson and other people who aren't on judiciary, you know, may have gotten sick. Certainly 2 judiciary members did get sick, and they were at the Amy Coney Barrett. So there may be so many different things going on. It's going to be really tough to trace. And that's one of the reasons why they don't want CDC doing the tracing, because CDC will tell us what they found, and they don't want us to know what they found.
Yes,
and that's really the whole bigger picture here. I mean, you have to step back and look and see what's going on here. Let me just give you some
Step 6 feet back.
polls
More.
and some heads up from those polls, because I think they're fascinating.
All
NBC
right.
Wall Street Journal, don't forget, had a Biden plus 14. Ipsos has a Biden plus 12. USC Dornsafe has a Biden plus 12. CNN had a Biden plus 16. The GMRS Boston Herald poll came out. Plus 14. I'm going to read to you a little bit from that because it's so fascinating, as well as Survey USA, Biden plus 10, but that's a little misleading because it was plus 8 before Trump went in the hospital and plus 16 after he was in the hospital.
Okay.
Right, so you have a smattering of plus 7 to plus 9s from other players yesterday. The aggregates is plus 9. And so for everybody who says to me, well, what about 2016? I'm not only going to mute you, I'm also going to tell you, don't even bother trying unless you tell me about 1980.
Oh, well, they won't be able to do that.
Well, yeah, I know. That's why I said
Most
it.
people- oh,
So
okay, all right.
1980, don't forget, is Carter, Reagan,
I forgot already.
and Carter is running behind Reagan, relatively unpopular president, you know, has stagflation, has the Iran hostage, but he's basically keeping pretty close on the whole,
Okay.
to Reagan's position for July, August, September. Then they have a debate, and the unpopular Carter holds his own with Reagan, but that wasn't the point. The point is people already decided they didn't like Carter. They were taking the measure of Reagan, and once they decided Reagan was okay and acceptable, then the polls changed. I'm sending to you, and you'll have this in the roundup, a little picture of what that polling looked like, put together by John Sides. And if you see, just right after the debate, all of a sudden Reagan's numbers take off and Carter's drop. So once the incumbent, who is unpopular, is in a situation where the challenger can basically say, okay, he's acceptable, then the incumbent loses. In this particular case,
I will take it.
Trump did a double because, first of all, he was trying to show that Biden was senile and couldn't handle attacks, and that's why he was trying to make him stutter, and he failed. But Trump also came across as crazy, a bully, nuts, out of control, and so that was a fail as well. And so the effects of all of this on the standing for Trump after the debate were pretty dramatic. And let me read to you some things. This is from Survey USA. Nationwide, Biden leads by 8 points after acrimonious debate before Trump is hospitalized. After Trump medevac to Walter Reed, Biden lead doubles to 16. That means that I guess by now it should be 32, right?
Yes,
And,
that would
probably
be the next
64 by the time we have the election. Averaging all likely voters, contest at this hour stands Biden 53, Trump 43. Volatile, fluid, could change. But if it's going to change, it's only going to change in one direction.
They say you should have plenty of fluid.
Right? Preferably IV. Among white middle-class voters, Trump and Biden tie. Among non-white middle-class voters, Biden leads 2-1. Among suburban men critical to Trump's support, he now trails Biden 51-44. Among suburban women, whom Trump covets, but struggles to find the right words of courtship, Trump trails by 21 points. That's what the write-up says.
That's
Biden
good.
58, Trump 37.
He just can't grab them, I guess, huh?
Right. Trump leads among Protestants, trails among Catholics, members of other religions, and those who do not identify with an organized religion. Trump leads by 20 points among evangelicals, 45 points among voters who are strongly pro-life, 18 points in households who have active military, 15 points among gun owners, and leads by 14 points among NASCAR fans.
Okay.
Okay. Biden leads by 78 points among African Americans, 59 points among voters who are strongly pro-choice, 59 points LGBTQ, 59 points among voters who say they are woke, 52 points among voters who say COVID-19 is the most important issue, 39 points among voters who say health care is the most important issue, also 39 points among single voters, 35 points in unions, 30 points among moderates. That's going to mean a lot in Ohio, and we have a CNN New York Times Ohio poll coming out today, 25 points in urban areas, 19 points among Asian Americans, 19 points among voters who are no longer married, 15 points among voters 18 to 39, and 11 points among Hispanics. And voters for Trump are voting for Trump and are voting for Trump 81, 17% against Biden. 58% are voting for Biden and 39% against Trump. And those voting for Trump, 78% do it enthusiastically and 77% for Biden. So there's no real difference there, and that was a stupid measurement anyway. The repeal of Obamacare, a loser for Trump. 56% of likely voters today have a favorable view of the Affordable Care Act. 38% see Obamacare unfavorably. And so there you have it. Now,
a lot of questions.
Well, they bring in a lot of information here. The Boston Herald ran a poll. Let me just read you the headline. Trump support craters after contracting coronavirus. Instead of a sympathy factor for Trump, there's been a stunning drop in his poll numbers. Catching coronavirus has been disastrous for Trump's reelection hopes, with support for the president plummeting. This is a plus 14 Biden since news of the infection broke, allowing Democratic nominee Joe Biden to open a commanding double-digit lead. Instead of a sympathy factor, there's been a stunning drop in Republican president's polls numbers. In 2 days of polling before Trump got COVID, the president trailed Biden by 46-41. In the 3 days of polling after, Biden held a 55-34% lead. that means Biden's lead grew by 16 points from pre-COVID to post-COVID diagnosis.
Wow.
That's a lot.
Okay.
And I'm going to get a little more into it, but a lot of this has to do with the stupid stunts they're doing. I'm going to bring you up a little bit of history here for all you Tippecanoe and Tyler 2 fans here.
Yeah. Wow. All right.
Okay. William Henry Harrison and John Tyler won an election. John Tyler, the vice president, then went on to become president himself. I forget. I'm not that good at this. I think it was like 10th or something like that. Mm-hmm. But historian Aaron Astor points out there was an event that people don't remember, which is worth noting at this time.
Yes.
Think of the joyride that Trump took at the hospital trying to kill his Secret Service people.
Yeah.
Okay?
Right.
This is up there, says Matt Karp, with John Tyler's celebratory Potomac cruise on the USS Princeton in 1844, when drunk dignitaries insisted they keep firing the experimental gun until it exploded, killing 2 cabinet members, 4 other top officials, and the president's enslaved valet.
Well,
now there's an event you probably didn't remember. I didn't until I saw that tweet. But keep in mind, Trump hasn't just infected, Kayleigh McEnany, Lord of Bats. He's also, at least exposed the entire Joint Chiefs of Staff, who are now in quarantine.
Yes.
Luckily, none of them have it at this point.
Right. Although I believe the vice commandant of the Coast Guard is the one who
that's who exposed the
yes.
Joint Chiefs, and that happened through the valet that carries the nuclear football that follows Trump around. I'm
out sick today. No nuclear arsenal.
It's a worthy event in history to remember.
Yeah, at least this one didn't explode because that one goes
it
off
did kind of
bad
metaphorically.
News. Well, the COVID bomb went off. That's true. And I've often maintained that COVID, the way they treated it was like a neutron bomb for morons. It just finds you.
Wait, there's more.
Oh, okay.
Okay, we have a new poll out of West Virginia.
West Virginia.
How
did they conduct this poll?
Like they do polls in all places. Right. They ask people what they think, and then they collate it and try to match it for, all this other stuff like education, age, et cetera, et cetera. In the race for U.S. president in West by God, Virginia,
right,
President Donald Trump holds a 56 to 38% lead over Democratic nominee Joe Biden.
Okay. Well, news travels a little slower there.
Wait. Think of the implications of this poll.
All right.
That's an 18-point lead.
Yeah.
In 2016, Trump won that state by like 43 points.
Okay. All right. Well, that's something.
It is something. And it's going to lead me to my next piece here, put together by Brett LaGuarto.
All right.
The under-the-radar polls that also look pretty good for Trump. Pretty good for Biden and pretty brutal for Trump. Congressional district and legislative polls also tell us what's happening in this election.
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Last week, I spoke with Tom Jensen, director of the firm Public Policy Polling, about the phenomenon of panic porn we see comparing the 2020 election to the 2016 election. We've already dealt with that. Okay. This is in 2016. It's closer to 1980. Jensen highlighted a key difference that his firm is finding in its 2020 polling compared to the work it was doing in 2016. 4 years ago, Jensen said, he started to get nervous about the presidential contest from state polling. PPP found that Hillary Clinton was trailing Obama's numbers in these legislative districts in places like Michigan and Pennsylvania. I kind of rationalized to myself, it was okay, maybe we're just not polling the other places. Well, that wasn't the case.
Sure.
This year, however, PPP has done 66 legislative polls in states including Michigan, Minnesota, North Carolina, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and Jensen says it's remarkable how consistent the difference is. Joe Biden is performing 6 to 8 points better than Clinton.
All right.
The shift is happening in areas we hear a lot about, like highly educated suburban districts, and it's happening in places we hear a lot less about, like rural areas where Biden is preventing Trump from running up the score like he did in 2016.
Okay.
It's worth exploring. And as Biden takes what this week looks like an expansive lead, a comprehensive look at state polls, like what Jensen was discussing at the legislative level, is hard to find publicly, but we can glean a lot of insight from looking at polling of U.S. House races, which are following a similar pattern, with help in 538, I surveyed 30 U.S. House polls, all of which were released in September or October, and I used the Daily Kos comparison of presidential results in 2012 and 2016, which is organized according to congressional district lines. Great work that
Yes.
David Neer and his folks have done. Together, these polls paint a clear picture. It's not just the national and state polls. In these closely watched districts, Biden's performing better than Clinton by an average of 9 points. And you can see a further breakdown of the polls in this spreadsheet he gives. To Jensen's point, these districts constitute a variety. Obama to Trump, Romney to a slightly smaller Trump, Romney to bigger Trump. One thing is consistent. Biden is doing significantly better in all of them. Okay. And then he goes on to individual districts, including picking on Jeff Van Drew, the turncoat who dresses funny.
Yeah, he's not even from West Virginia. And he
Jeff Van Drew, a Democrat from New Jersey's 2nd Congressional District until December 2019, defected from the party on the House vote to impeach Trump. The next day he announced he was switching parties. I don't think this is a good fit for me. Instead, I think this is better. And more and more, it's looking like he's wrong.
Yeah. Don't you think?
Right. Looking back, it's easy to see what Van Drew saw, a rapidly changing district swinging from a comfortable win for Obama by 8 points in 2012, 4-point victory for Trump, and now things have swung back. 3 recent polls have Biden leading in the district by 4, 5, and 5 points, respectively. Wow. Okay, so that's like 8 or 9 point swing. That's exactly what he's talking about here. The most recent poll is from New Jersey's own Monmouth University, which found several brutal underlying numbers for the president in the district. His approval rating is underwater by 6 points. Only 40% of viewers view him favorably compared to 52% who view him unfavorably. And Van Drew, he's losing.
Yeah.
All right? And there's a bunch of ones like this, and we'll get back to how that relates to what Trump did when he got in the car and did the joy run.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to hear that connection too. Van Drew, wow, that's political instincts for you. Really amazing. Okay, 2 minutes and we're back to it. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, that are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Networks Radio. We continue on with our exploration of, I guess we're done with how dumb Jeff Van Drew is.
Yeah.
It's very, is the answer. I mean, that's a guy who really, talk about, changing direction with the wind. Like, that was remarkably stupid. But,
right.
Okay.
So,
he's not the focus.
Tommy Veeder, T. Veeder, notes on Twitter a Washington Post story which talks about how the White House is screwing up even now communicating with their own staff. So now the people in the White House hate Trump even more.
Yes.
But in the process of doing that, there's this quote. A GOP group working to elect Senate Republicans conducted polling over the weekend in 4 states, Colorado, Georgia, Montana, and North Carolina, as Trump was hospitalized. The president's numbers dropped significantly in every state, falling by about 5 points in all 4. That's a big deal for Georgia and North Carolina, where they were essentially tied. Or in North Carolina, maybe Biden had a 1-point lead. Okay, so I think we've established that Trump being in the hospital hasn't helped him.
Yes.
So what I wrote this morning is that there's simply no question that the debate was a disaster for Trump and the hospitalization a second disaster politically. Trump can't change who he is. Voting's going on now.
Yeah.
And I'm a native New Yorker, and I can't think, and this is where the controversial part comes in. It's not controversial because people will be mad at you. They just couldn't really necessarily agree with this. But I'm telling you the way I see it.
All right.
I can't think but that the Staten Island and Long Island cops and security guards and drivers and support staff who often vote Republican look at Trump going for a hospital joyride and thinking, that could be me. He's trying to kill us for a political stunt. And then you see him gasp for breath and film himself putting more staff in danger when he gets to the White House. So this isn't owning the libs. It's threatening to kill us. And for what? I don't think this is going to go the way Jared figured it would. And according to the polls, it's not. And people said, no, Staten Island, they're all, racist Republicans. It's not going to change their vote. I think that's missing the point. You don't go from an 8-point lead to a 16-point lead just by getting the people who already were on your side.
Yeah.
I think what's happening now, you got to remember, these people have families.
Yeah.
So if the guy, the loud cop who says, "Oh, I'm Trump forever," maybe your brother who used to vote for Trump isn't keen on having him kill you, even if you say it's okay with you. And maybe your wife and kids, or your husband and kids, aren't so keen on it either. And so, you wind up losing people. And the idea that, these folks are who they are and they will never change, it's kind of a cartoon caricature of what people actually are. I'm not saying that the whole Trump base is going to collapse, but now you're starting to erode actually that base. You've already gotten everybody who hated Trump. And for the past month, you're starting to get the people who are undecided. And I go back to those focus groups that we were talking about. The focus groups are basically labeling themselves as undecided. What they really are soft Republicans who are appalled at Trump, but watch Fox News and think that Biden is senile and a socialist. And so they can't vote for Trump, but they'd like to find an excuse to do it. And they're unsure what to do with Biden. Then they watch the debate, and Trump is a madman. Yeah. And then they watch the hospital thing, and Trump is Evita. And he's out there singing on the balcony, right? Which is a Project Lincoln ad, which is very funny.
Yeah, right. I saw this one.
And they're thinking, what do I do? I can't vote for this guy. I can't. I'd like to. If he just gave me some excuse to do. I can't do it. And that's why we're seeing the numbers that we're going to see. Will they snap back? Is it just a bounce? We don't know that yet. But we know what happened in 1980. Those voters broke away from Carter and they never came back.
Yeah. All right. So good. 1980 is the one you all have to study if you don't remember it.
Right. And also Tippecanoe and Tyler, too. So let me give you Tim Alberta, who got 3 out of the 4 points he was making correct.
Wow.
4 funny feelings about 2020, he writes. With 28 days until the election, it's time to inch out on a limb.
All right. Why not?
Okay. There's no question that President Donald Trump is losing.
Cool.
That former Vice President Joe Biden holds the high ground. Still, if the 2016 election taught us anything, shut up, Tim. It didn't. It's that election forecasts aren't worth the paper they're printed on. Everything was correct. You just didn't know how to read it. Okay? Yeah. 30% chance of winning is not 0% chance of winning. And the polls nailed the national exactly right popular vote. So if you didn't know how to read 2016, that's your problem, not the election forecast. Anyway, we're at a stage of the race when reporters should feel confident unloading their notebook and sharing their hunches and strongly held suspicions. I think it was, I can't even remember who said it. Somebody, one of the reporters was on Twitter yesterday saying, look, I know everybody's afraid to say this, but Trump is losing, and he's probably going to lose big.
You said it.
Well, I said it. And I said to him, I said it.
Yeah.
We are at a stage of the race, however, when reporters should feel confident unloading their notebooks, sharing their hunches, and having spent the last year working to reconcile 2 spheres of reporting on the ground with voters and inside the campaign with party officials, I'm comfortable that enough dots have been connected to offer my fundamental impressions about this race. Remember, Tim's a conservative, okay, and he has excellent conservative credentials, and that's his beat, and so that's why I'm paying attention to it. What follows are not ironclad assertions of realities. Rather, what I'm sharing today are 4 things I think about the 2020 election.
All right.
Number 1, and this is a fascinating one, Trump fatigue is peaking at the wrong time for Trump.
Okay.
There was chatter over the weekend that the president's COVID diagnosis might engender sympathy, humanizing a man. That dynamic could be in play. But from what I've seen, it'll be washed out, if not overtaken, by an alternative reaction to the spectacle, fatigue. It's impossible to quantify how tired Americans are of this presidency. But it's a constant theme in the conversations I have with voters, including diehard Trump supporters. They feel trapped inside a reality TV show and are powerless to change the channel. They want a break, even if they don't want a new program. The exhaustion has ebbed and flowed. It's no coincidence his lowest approval was after Charlottesville. Unfortunately for them, the past few days have featured the highest drama of the past 4 years. Even when stricken with a lethal disease, Trump could not abide disappearing from the headlines. This is the gift he cannot bring himself to give. It's not that voters will punish the president for becoming infected. It's that voters, weary of their social media feeds and kitchen table conversations being dominated by Trump, may resent that he turned a sympathetic situation into yet another showcase of administrative incompetence and self-celebrating bravado. Which leads me to number 2.
Wow, okay. That's not enough.
The silent majority in this election is not who you think it is. Okay? People who love the president are vocal about it. There's no shy Trump voter. Okay? But I do believe there's a silent majority against Trump. In my travels, the group could be considered the kid curmudgeons. They're younger Gen Xers and older millennials, college-educated folks 28 to 42, who aren't ideological, are not partisan, consume little political news, rarely vote, but who might flood the polls this fall just because Trump annoys them.
Yes.
Is that overly simplistic? Maybe, but I've been stunned at how many people I've encountered fit this description. They're working on their careers, they're starting families, they're buying first homes, they're building a life. They don't know a ton about either party's political platform. What they do know is Trump irritates them to no end.
Yes.
They just want to get rid of him and get on with the party. Right?
Okay.
Number 3 is the one he got wrong. Democrats will regret placing so much emphasis on absentee voting because things could go wrong. That's incorrect. That's just, I'll just dismiss that. Not even worth going over. Number 4, Trump might lose women voters by numbers we've never imagined. Stop me if you've heard this before. The president has a problem with female voters. Yeah, this has been observed by like everybody. Trump has been briefed on it time and again by his team. It's something we don't have a name for because we've never seen anything like it. But the president, seeing ominous signs of this earlier in the year, sought to scare the voters back into his camp, warning of an assault on the suburbs. But this tactic appears to have backfired. Recent internal polling from Republicans and Democrats alike suggests that Trump's law and order message alienated far more women than it attracted. I remember having a fight with this on Twitter with Hotline Josh Grashauer, because he was tweeting every single, look at this story of there's a car on fire in Kenosha. Look at this story of somebody in this obscure suburb you never heard of was arrested. Who cares? That's not moving the needle. That's not what's going on here. Maybe Republican men get worried about this because they're looking for the thing that'll justify what they want to do, just like those focus group voters. But this ain't it.
The gun they bought.
This isn't just, exactly. This isn't just a problem for Trump in purple states. Last week, Tim says, I heard from one of the smartest Republicans alive, a longtime party operator who lives in a state Trump carried by double digits. He told me the polling he was seeing, that was something out of a nightmare. These were numbers he never expected to see in his lifetime. The only thing more dizzying than that, I had another conversation with another dependable red state Republican. I wonder if that first one was Haley Barbour. The very next day and heard the very same thing. Both of those men were sounding the alarm, alerting me that Trump could actually lose their states and would be at the very least dragging down a number of down-ballot Republicans because women have turned on the GOP at a historic clip. Trump lost women by 13 points to Clinton, according to exit polls, and Republicans have long worried the figure could climb in the high teens. There's genuine worry that the margin could explode north of 20 points, the biggest gender gap in modern election history. And that's his piece, and I think it is just spot on.
Okay.
Now, here's another one. It's just a tweet from Joel Wertheimer that's worth talking about. Remember that West Virginia poll?
Yes.
West by God, Virginia, where Trump is only winning by 18 when he should have been winning by 42. Joel Wertheimer says, I'm looking at the poll, and when you've been listening to David Shore so much that a wildly good West Virginia poll makes you nervous that all the other polls are missing people with low levels of societal trust.
Okay.
Societal trust. In 2016, and maybe in 2018, the polls missed education voters, low education, high education. But there's another group who don't like to answer polls. And this is sort of the shy Trump voter theory. Okay? They don't like polls. They don't answer polls. They do not have high societal trust. They don't trust pollsters. They don't trust anybody. They don't trust revenuers. They'll throw you off their property. They just don't trust anyone.
Okay. Yes.
All right. So how do you know how they think if you don't get them in the polls? And there are ways to get them. And David Shore gave a presentation at the University of Michigan and said that his work in 2018, controlling not just for education, but also civic engagement and trust. Do you think more people are trustworthy? Do you volunteer? Or more accurate and less biased than leaving that out? So if you include those, you get better numbers. And it may be that those people are actually kind of annoyed with Trump and breaking against him, is what I'm trying to say. Whereas in 2016, they broke for him.
Yeah.
And that's why you get those numbers in West Virginia without realizing why the poll is so different.
Okay. I can accept that as a possible explanation for...
So we won't know
West
that.
Virginia.
That's not something we can explore until after the election.
Right.
But
And they might
that's
not
like
tell
a
us.
really bad poll for... He's talking about, why is West Virginia so bad? How could this happen?
Yeah.
Why didn't we pick this up? Why didn't we get that people are unhappy with Trump to the point where they don't even want to
That I
vote for
don't
him in
know.
West Virginia? And the answer is, well, you weren't looking at the low levels of societal trust people. Of course.
Okay.
Why weren't you?
'Cause they didn't
Everybody
have a
knows you're
cool
supposed to be
name.
looking at those people. Well, I don't know.
What's the
But
name
that's
for
that's the reason, the genesis for this kind of conversation. And I think it's pretty interesting.
Yeah. All right. That's I don't know how you would give them a snappy enough name to make people look at them. Moms of kids who quit soccer. I don't know.
Yeah, something like that, right?
I guess.
So-
I don't even know what that. Yeah. Right. It's hard to quantify or sum up in a phrase. But low societal trust does it. But that's the sort of phrase that make people say, I have low trust in that phrase. That's very high-minded, but it makes sense.
Right. So let's go back to what we do know. And what are we seeing today? Let me just read some of these because Nate Cohen over at The Upshot is running a daily and sometimes twice a day. Oh, it looks like my... Here, I can fix it by removing... Oops. The Skype thing had frozen, and I wasn't able to add more things so I could tell you what's going on. But I'm going to give you the link here. I fixed that by getting rid of the 1980 poll.
Okay.
I'll put that in later. And he's looking at today's polls as we get them. And what he's doing is giving the margin and then looking at the difference from 2016. So in Maryland, for example, Change Research, Biden plus 29, that's plus 3 for Biden in Maryland.
Okay. Versus
Next to his home state of Delaware.
Okay.
So he's improved 3 points over that. But Iowa, Civics poll has Biden plus 1. It's a 10-point improvement from 2016. Texas, Civics has even this morning. It's a 9-point improvement.
Yeah.
So those 9-point improvements we were talking about with PPP are being seen in other polls as well. USC Dornsife has Biden plus 11. That's a 9-point improvement. And West Virginia has Trump plus 18. That's a 24-point improvement. And looking at what happened yesterday as a whole, Nate Cohen describes it as the worst day of polling for the president this cycle, a day when even the good news was bad news.
Okay.
It's been 4 days since the announcement that President Trump contracted coronavirus, so we're only now beginning to get a picture of where the race stands after his diagnosis. When you consider the number of days left in the race, it's probably the worst day of polling the president has had. And he gives examples. Arizona, Biden plus 1, Biden plus 6, Biden plus 4. Florida, Biden plus 4, Biden plus 6, even. Maine, Biden plus 11. Michigan, Biden plus 8, Biden plus 8. These are separate polls. North Carolina, even. And Biden plus 2 and Biden plus 3. And remember, if his numbers are dropping by 5 points like that Republican pollster said, we'll see that in the coming days. And, of course, the big one, Pennsylvania, Biden plus 10, and Wisconsin, Biden plus 7. And in the national polls, Biden plus 11, Biden plus 8, Biden plus 9, Biden plus 16, Biden plus 10, Biden plus 14, with the caveat that those who pre- and post hospitalization made mention, as we did at the top of the show, found that Biden's lead doubled after Trump went in the hospital. And these national polls are reading anywhere between plus 6 and plus 12, plus 14 compared to what Trump did last election versus Clinton. So it was a terrible day for polling as far as that goes. And the extent of the bad news for the president, most national surveys show Biden ahead by at least 10 points, including a daunting 16-point average in a CNN poll. And again, there's at least two that had 14. Then there's Mr. Biden's double-digit lead in Pennsylvania. The short version, if it's even remotely in the ballpark, it's a big blow to Trump's chances at re-election. And the president's good news was still pretty bad. There's president's best poll was down 8 nationwide, tied in Florida, down 4 in Pennsylvania, down 1 in Arizona, and tied in North Carolina. Those were his good polls yesterday.
Okay.
These results would have seemed pretty typical 2 weeks ago, and now they count as his best. And they're not even enough for a lead in any of those states. So the polling picture is a bit blurry, but it's pretty clear that the president's position has deteriorated significantly over the last 10 days. And what's less clear is why. That is to say, how much of it is the debate, how much of it is the hospitalization, how much of it is the joy ride and the Il Duce Evita balcony thing. And by the way, how much of it is a steroid-fueled mania? He gets up and tweets like 107 times in 3 minutes.
Yes. That's a good question, and I guess in the coming days,
irresponsible not to speculate. But what's going on there?
We'll find out, and we'll see how much it affects things. I guess the one-off of the maybe steroid-induced mania. I guess one of the big news stories of the day, afternoon and evening yesterday, canceling all negotiations for any COVID relief bill before the election, and then reversing himself immediately
and having the
after.
stock market crash because of it.
Yes, right. So he remember, he started the day, I guess, still on the record from a few days ago as saying it was a must-do and that Congress should, get to work. And then he changed his mind. I don't know. I guess he got his steroids at about 3:30, and then by 4 o'clock, he totally reversed course, and I guess forgot, stock humper that he is, forgot that the markets were open for another half hour, though you could certainly crash the futures markets. Nobody cares about that. And at 4 o'clock issues this declaration that there's not only, there's going to be no stimulus, and he's going to prevent it, and I'll veto it between now and the election, of essentially telling people, I'm going to hold you all hostage. And then if I'm elected, then maybe we'll do some relief. The stock market tanks in the last half hour, and then by 7 o'clock, someone has gotten to him, I guess, or the steroids have worn off, and he's back to agreeing with the Fed chair who says we got to have some stimulus and have it fast.
Yeah, so, and then tweeted a whole bunch of suggestions that had already been rejected by Mitch McConnell.
Yeah,
Jake Sherman from Politico Playbook points out that the whole difficulty here actually is McConnell.
Oh.
Because Pelosi's been negotiating with Mnuchin. And Mnuchin could probably talk Trump into doing something that's to Trump's benefit before the election to give people money.
Yes, he wanted to do that. Always did.
And McConnell wants none of it.
In a weird way, but
McConnell wants a tiny, a tiny stimulus. I guess the theory is that he doesn't think it'll hurt his Republican chances of controlling the Senate. And so after the election, when Biden wins, the economy will tank, and then he can blame Biden.
I guess.
But he's been the one that says, I don't want any of that. I don't want a stimulus more than $750 billion. You're talking about starting at 5 or 4 and then coming down to 2 as a compromise. I don't want more than 3/4.
Yeah.
And if he says no and won't bring it to a vote, it's not going anywhere.
I guess not anytime soon.
Which is another reminder, you got to get him out of the Senate. That same civics poll that showed Texas tied shows MJ Hager trailing John Cornyn by 1 point.
Yeah. Yes, it's gotten to that time where
Jamie Harrison,
throwing
Political,
money.
just moved the South Carolina Senate from lean Republican to toss-up.
Yes, they saw my money.
Cal Cunningham's got his issues in North Carolina. Apparently, he's been having an affair. But the polling isn't really changing very much at this point. It probably needs to. Cunningham may survive this, but it's going to be messy. Susan Collins is in trouble in Maine. Of course, there was a debate last night. I saw a little bit of it.
Oh,
And Martha McSally is just awful.
oh yes.
It was another one of those of the exasperated debate moderators saying, can't you just tell us whether or not you support Donald Trump for re-election? I support Arizona, and I support legislation that helps Arizona. But that's not the question, the moderator said. The question is, do you support Donald Trump? I support legislation.
Oh, I mean,
I support legislation that winds up on Donald Trump's desk.
Sure.
And the moderator just shook his head. And, Mark Kelly said, well, of course I don't support Donald Trump. That's clear. My opponent, basically can't do anything.
Yeah, she does, and she knows that most people don't and doesn't want to say it. That's, you couldn't make it any clearer. I hope he made
right.
It
was really funny. And then
clear.
she tried to pin Kelly down on a vote for Amy Coney Barrett. She said, there's a really important election because of the special nature of it. Whoever wins might be in a position to be voting on Amy Coney Barrett, and my opponent won't commit to voting one way or the other. He doesn't want you to know how he's going to vote. And Kelly said, that's nonsense. I'm going to vote no. She's terrible.
Yeah. Okay.
And it was like, the whole talking point just exploded. Imploded.
Well, yeah, they're doing
terrible.
Great. Yeah.
And she didn't look good doing it either. Yeah. I mean, it was this flat affect, I'm voting for legislation. But what about Trump? I'm voting for legislation. You're not answering the question. I'm voting for legislation. So, not a winner there.
Legislation, good. I don't know. Yeah, she's, not doing well. And, of course, I did see somebody noting about her poor performance that she goes down in history perhaps as an asterisk, person who happened to have served in the Senate despite losing races for both Senate seats within a couple of years. Never been elected to the Senate, McSally, and yet here we are saddled with her. And that's got to be rubbing people in Arizona the wrong way after all this time. We rejected her the first time, got the one we wanted, and then we got handed McSally anyway. And now she says, will you please, legitimize this? And the answer is no. Certainly not with this program. I support legislation.
Right. Really. So just a couple of reminders in the few minutes I have left before I leave for today, but I'll be back tomorrow. First of all, back in January of 2017, I had a whole rant about Trump as a chaos agent.
Oh, yeah.
You can't trust him. And he's already lying to you about the size of his inaugural. And he's just going to put people like Sean Spicer and others to lie to you. They're going to lie directly to your face. And the reporters better get used to it because he's not going to do good things, and the chaos part of it is just completely integral to who he is and what's going to happen. And that turned out to be true.
Yes,
all of it.
So really, just yesterday afternoon would have illustrated it all by itself.
Yeah, pretty much.
But then
I was thinking about that when I was watching. But the other, of course, is just to step back and look at the big picture about Joe Biden. And I said this before the South Carolina primary. Don't count him out because he's basically a decent person, and decency counts for a lot. And as it turns out, looking at the election where we are now, decency counts for a lot. That's Biden's secret weapon. He had a Gettysburg address yesterday, which basically talked about you need to be decent. We need to bring the country together. It's a pretty good speech, probably the best one of his campaign so far. And just in contrast to what Trump is trying to do, which is still trying to lie about what happened with this cluster, I won't use the second word, at the White House, lying about his testing. He probably was never tested at all. He exposed all these people. And the general public is catching on to all of that. He doesn't have a plan about what to do about it. That's obvious. He refuses CDC testing. And so we have this debate today. I'm not going to talk a tremendous amount about that. We'll just see how it comes. But we have, what's Harris's job? Harris's job is to hold her own. As Armando's pointed out, usually, and this may be an exception this time, but usually what happens with vice presidential debates is nobody watches. It's like half the audience you get for a presidential.
Yeah.
And in this particular case, it'll probably be a bigger audience because if people think that Biden is old, they might want to see who will be president just in case. So they'll watch Harris. And Harris's job is to bring up coronavirus and the fact that Pence was the coronavirus task force person who screwed everything up, ignored Fauci, sidelined Birx even. Not that Birx was any great shakes, but, put Scott Atlas there instead. And she needs to nail him on that and just hold her own and draw on everything else. She doesn't need to destroy him. That's not necessary. Just prove that she could be president, and that's all she needs to do for tonight.
Yeah. Well,
now, if she does more than that,
I think
wonderful.
she could do it. Yeah.
I know there's a lot of Harris fans who think she's going to do way more than that. She's been underappreciated. She's a terrific prosecutor. I'm just saying from a political point of view, she's the vice president, and all she needs to do is prove she can be president. And by the way, you must, absolutely must, nail Pence on his coronavirus response because he's responsible. He is head of the task force.
Right, absolutely. And I'm sure that's exactly why he objected so strongly to any visual reminders on stage of the fact that we're still in the pandemic.
Yeah, all she has to do is turn and say, we have this plexiglass here because you failed.
Right. She should bring spitballs. It didn't get to you. Thankfully, we have these teeny little shields that aren't going to do anything.
I would love to protect Kamala Harris. And not that I wish ill, but I would love if, like, Maya Rudolph would just show up with a martini.
I'm going to do this instead, right? Yeah.
Here's my body double. You're not safe.
Yeah.
Maya Rudolph volunteered to do this.
Maybe.
And so go.
Yeah. I don't know if we can convince her to do it. I think everybody in America is looking at this picture of the stage is thinking this is kind of crazy. I see Ryan Liz.
It's insane. They shouldn't be having this debate. It's terrible.
No.
Nobody should be.
No, and after all, we've all been doing so many things remotely or from. All they need is another couple of cameras, and they could just move them further apart. There's no reason to have this sort of intimate.
America's
staging.
been on a Zoom meeting for like 6 months. There's no reason these people can't.
These guys, they shouldn't even have to wear pants at this debate. Honestly, we should be able to handle this at this stage. All right. Well, we'll see whether there's any demands at the last minute or whether they brave it out or what. And I guess we could watch for that value. Thanks, Greg.
And we'll talk about the debate tomorrow.
All right. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. After our short 1-minute break, lots to think about, lots to catch up with, and I'm trying to think. There are many other stories that we have somehow managed not yet to land on, but we have first. I guess we'll just take care of this business. Some housekeeping business to address here at home. Those of you who have, few of you have written in saying, what's with the weird new music that opens up the show? Or a few of you who are longtime listeners, what's with the weird old music that now opens up the show? What happened to my regular and familiar ordinary opening and closing? And what about the artwork? If you download the podcast rather than listen to the show live, you may have noticed a difference in the artwork as well, changing from our familiar orange flag guy over to a Kagro in the Morning blue branded artwork. And there's a lot behind it, but nothing to alarm you, I don't think. Although, what was I was just thinking, there was another item on the list that we might add in the middle. But at any rate, basic situation is that this marks a rebranding of the show and a separation from the Daily Kos umbrella that I've always wondered whether this was coming anytime soon or not, but we just sort of let it linger for a long time. But many of you have noticed that over at Daily Kos, a remaking of the organization and a change in focus in terms of the way the media is used, the way the news we provide is represented, etc. And of course, that the Daily Kos radio program and the Kagro in the Morning program sort of existed independent of all of this. And it was always a little baffling, I think, probably to some people who stopped and thought about it. And always a little baffling to me. I always felt a little bit like disconnected from the centralized operations such as they were over, they professionalized Daily Kos essentially and brought it under tighter managerial control from the sort of Wild West days when we were kind of, just a blog and the people writing on it and putting out the news under its banner were sort of, a loose collection of independent people. I was going to say independent-minded, not politically independent-minded in that sense, but just sort of their own collection of free agents who were brought together under this umbrella. And as the years went on, things became more and more professionalized. And it wasn't for many years that Daily Kos had a professional and paid staff. And that changed, not too long after it broke out and became a big force in Democratic politics. But I don't know, somewhere in the mid to late 2000s, as things professionalized and people began to, come on board and draw salaries, and that there was, benefits and healthcare coverage, et cetera, for everybody. And about that time of that reorganization, when that possibility was held out to me, is that everybody, drawing any kind of professional salary of any kind going forward from that point would be on their healthcare plan and insurance, et cetera, all being offered. And and this of course was all centered in Berkeley, California, though there were still people working all over the country for them and doing. We were early explorers in the remote workplace, I guess, because of the nature of our online work. But that never made any particular sense for me. I was sort of on my own and working, doing these things remotely from across the country. Even before the Kagro in the Morning show, the idea of the radio program and the idea of a larger radio channel was ever born. Just writing, like for instance, doing the old Congress Matters blog or the Today in Congress posts on the front page at Daily Kos, or even later on the Gun Fail series that I've sort of worked into my repertoire. And there was no real reason to bring me under the managerial umbrella of Daily Kos at the time, and I existed sort of independently of all of it. And also I already had fine health insurance coverage through my wife's job, which was always a lot better than mine anyway, so we went with that. And so there was very little reason to come on board as a full-time employee there. And then as operations of Congress Matters scaled back, and I chose to take a different direction. And the Daily Kos radio idea was just basically me saying, I'm getting tired of doing everything in written form. I'd love to just talk this stuff out. And I had all sorts of, grandiose ideas of one, that there would be other people who would want to do the same thing. But really, it all just started out as, well, I'm going to do this one radio show, and we'll call it, or we'll put it under this umbrella called Daily Kos Radio, because we want to, people were trending towards multimedia at that point. Although even by that point, it was becoming clear that video, for better or for worse, was going to be the direction people wanted to go in. But that wasn't where I wanted to go with it necessarily. But I thought, some people could do their podcasts with video, others could do it as radio, whatever. But we'll create this Daily Kos Radio group, and if any other contributing editors or users or community members felt like doing the same thing, because podcasting was such an easy thing to break into, relatively speaking, they'll do it, and we can plug them in under this larger umbrella. Everyone can have their own show name, but maybe we'll fill out a full day's worth of radio style programming under this umbrella. And it didn't happen. And it never became a formal project for them or for me to, recruit others to do it. It was just, there's an opportunity that exists there. And then for a time, there was one or two other podcasts that kind of popped up under the Daily Kos umbrella. But even then, they didn't plug it into any kind of Daily Kos radio lineup or anything. It was just podcasts because they can independently exist. They did. And they had nothing to do with one another. And over the years, I wondered, when are they just going to say, you're not, it doesn't make any sense. We have a button for you on the front page. It doesn't do anything. We're not making any advertising revenue with it. And even if we did, we'd let you keep the advertising revenue rather than taking it from you. So, nothing was really happening. But they were perfectly happy to let everything go. Just because, well, why not? Why? No one wants to make the phone call that says, we're ending your project. But as they went through this latest round of even further professionalization, and the staff has expanded tremendously since even those days of early professionalization. And now it's a big operation. and firmly established, as sort of a national presence, the Daily Kos. And of course, in this highly polarized atmosphere, very frequently, Daily Kos, of course, finds itself a target of right-wing activists who want very badly to hang some sort of manufactured controversy around the neck of Daily Kos and see what they can do. It's never succeeded before and unlikely to succeed anytime in the future, but it's something you become wary of when the organization grows to a size where people are dependent on it for their living, and a lot of people are these days. So things sort of floated along for a while, and I always wondered over the last, let's say, 10 years, when they would say, this doesn't do anything for us, and the relatively small amount with which we underwrite the continuation of the show doesn't bear any fruit for us anymore. And I always wondered when that was going to come. And the answer is now. I guess that's the short answer of it. And I guess they were planning on doing this after the election, because they like to postpone everything until after an election, because it's a crazy time for them and everybody's thinking about 100 other things. And traditionally after an election, the plate clears and you can handle the rest of your business. After this election might not turn out to be the case, but generally speaking, that's their target. When along comes an opportunity to address this long-standing weird divide between us and the rest of the Daily Kos umbrella, and the existence of this anomalous, grandfathered, independent, nobody's looking to see what he's doing operation, can come under their tighter control. And the opportunity came in the form of, one, Donald Trump contracting COVID, and two, the immediate national mania for not saying anything too terribly awful about Donald Trump, such that no independent or no bad faith right-wing actor can say, aha, the official position of Daily Kos, through whatever tenuous connection you want to try to make, is that Donald Trump should die, and die immediately. And of course, that was never, certainly never Daily Kos's position. I would accept it as an outcome, but it was not necessarily the position of the Kagro in the Morning Show that he must absolutely die and die immediately. But the danger was there, and you ought to talk about it, and we talk about it in Kagro in the Morning fashion, which is not necessarily the way that they would talk about it, let's say, on the front page of Daily Kos, where there are now, along with the rest of the professional standards, editorial standards. And if you are going to publish something on the front page, it now comes under the scrutiny of a professional team, which is a good thing, and keeps them able to employ a large number of people to give good, solid, progressive news analysis, and sometimes means you can't indulge, let's say what might be your sense of good fun in discussing these things, because other people are going to take it very poorly. So anyway, Trump goes in the hospital with COVID-19. I tweet what I always tweet about Donald Trump for the past couple of months. I am reminded now there's a serious danger that we have very little time to drive the point home that Donald Trump should never, ever be afforded a state funeral. Only now, that same point that I've been making for a couple of months, it takes on a different, patina, different sheen to it, because of course he's facing a life-threatening illness, and people are sensitive about such things. And so the Daily Caller or Breitbart or someone would take something like this, say, who is this person who dares, say this thing about no state funeral for Trump? I now am taking notice of, because of the sensitivities of the moment. And they open up the bio, and there's the Daily Kos connection, even though even then I was about only as loosely connected to Daily Kos professional operations as anyone could be, but they wouldn't matter. That wouldn't matter to them. They don't know the situation, and they wouldn't care even if they did, and they'd try to hang it around the neck of Daily Kos, and even if it never worked, it would just be headache and problems for the people there trying to maintain the operation. So it bumps up the date when they find it convenient, most convenient, to say this sort of loosey-goosey stuff isn't really going to work for us anymore. And why don't you essentially separate, and you can keep, you are who you are. The show is what it is. We don't object to it. We only object to saying that it remains branded as a Daily Kos product. And since it really doesn't go through any of the Daily Kos managerial process or editorial process, well, it never really was part of the Daily Kos empire, so to speak. And so it makes a certain amount of sense. And so it's not a punishment. I'm not banned from Daily Kos. I'm not prohibited from posting the morning link to the show in the morning post announcing our best guess at what's coming up. But at the very least, links to the show and links to the live stream. But instead of having it appear on the front page, it appears only on what used to be, and I guess if you look at the URL, still is the Daily Kos Radio group page, which we tried to change the title of the page to Kagro in the Morning instead, and rebrand that way. And we break away from the artwork, and we break away from the color scheme even as well, and do things more independently. So my thanks go out over the weekend, especially to Tom Cheevers, whose Coffee Cast I think still occupies a place in everybody's podcast radio lineup, but who's been very helpful to me in giving a professional shine. What professional shine there is to this show exists largely because of his production work. He did the artwork, both the orange flag guy artwork for Daily Kos Radio, and now the revised, and I mean, really, the amount of work he did over the weekend to make it a relatively seamless transition. He produced the new intros to the show and the new close to the show, making sure that we were rebranding away from anything that would cause trouble for our friends at Daily Kos, and the artwork and everything. And he'll be working on refining it. And as he did it, and as we ran through it, we remembered a long time ago we had similar opening music and then somebody wrote in and said, the new music with that sort of radio tuning static thing scared the crap out of me in my headphones when I played the podcast. And then we said, oh yeah, and then that's when we made the transition over to that more gentle opening, service desk bell ding and more mellow music. So maybe we'll refine things a little bit more still. We'll see, unless people are really enjoying the wake-up call that they're getting from the new intro. It could be possible that we've evolved to that point now. But I thank him. My thanks to Justice for keeping us on the Netroots radio lineup. I think we're still doing well by them. And thanks to Greg, too, for his support in the middle of all this, as I had to tell him, we've got some issues here with what's been tweeted over the weekend. And I'm not sure how this is going to fall out. And he said, well, I got no problem showing up for work on Monday. It's not even work. So I'll go ahead and do it. There was a question mark about whether or not can Joan continue? She's the Daily Kos senior political writer. But then she appears on outside radio and television programs all the time. And I guess as testament to the fact that there's no anger or resentment going on here, at least on, in terms of we can't have anything whatsoever to do with your show. They said, oh, no, we just go through the same process we would for any other outside show, which is, there's a managerial check on, you're not going on a Nazi show, right? Nope, it's the same one I always go on. Okay, go ahead. So that's good news, too. They could have, decided to stand in the way of that and didn't. And so that's good news. Ian Reifowitz, I checked on your status. They have no problem with that either. And so we can look forward to having you on Friday, if you're still willing. Maybe you were only here for the Daily Kos Association. I don't think so, but it's possible. So that's it. The show goes on as planned, and with new artwork, which doesn't make a great deal of difference to what it sounds like. New music, I guess, which does, but we'll be working on that. Tom tells me he's already tinkering with the things to smooth out the rough edges and enjoying doing all this stuff. And so at this point, the next order of business is, yes, we've lost some financial underwriting in this from Daily Kos. No, I don't think it will destroy us. And yes, I think we could make it up with a serious pitch about the Patreon support pages and the other mechanisms through which you can support. You can still support us through PayPal, through the Cash Square app. That too, another easy way of doing it. We still have a few people that find even older school ways of doing it as well. But it's a lousy time to be asking people for money because, of course, every spare cent that you have is supposed to be being jammed into the various election contests around the country. And I prefer that you do that. But, of course, I prefer that everybody send me all the money in the world. I want to be as rich as Donald Trump thinks he is. And then I could give a lot of that money to so many other people, including I'll take care of your political contributions for you. How about that? Anyway, so at some point after the election, when people are getting back on their feet and we hope that matters are more settled, I will make the pitch again. Of course, if you happen to have cash to spare now, you're welcome to do it. Patreon.com is the easiest place to make recurring pledges, a monthly contribution towards the show. Well, you know the pitch. If you listen to the show by podcast at all, you know not only do we remind you of that daily, but that we owe you an updated announcement about those things. Anyway, Patreon is Patreon. Patreon.com/KagroX is the way to do it. Scott Anderson, thank you very much. A text says, I'll still be here too. And by the way, your contributions can help keep him happy while he's here as well. It's time once again to boost the meager earnings that I send his way for doing us the great favor of relieving us of the trouble of writing every afternoon summary of the show. For some reason, that's just a mental block for me, and I can't bring myself to do it. And I'm grateful that Scott's been willing to do it, and I'd love to be able to make him a billionaire as well. So if you are a contributor now, we thank you, because if you weren't, this would be it. We'd just say, forget it. There's no way to go forward. If you're not a contributor yet, but have been thinking about it, that would be great. We'd love to have you. If you were going to be a contributor after the election because you were giving all your money to Joe Biden or Jamie Harrison or MJ Hagar or somebody else who was going to battle out on the front lines for you, that is fine too. We can live until after that happens, and then the drive starts in earnest. If you are a supporter who has been a $5 a month subscriber and has always thought, maybe I could be $6, $7, $8, $9, $10, $40,000 a month, whatever it might be, think about that as well. If we have kept you sane through the Trump era, that's amazing. And, we'd love to be able to keep you, well, at the very least, keep you sane through the transition to civil war, I guess, or whatever it is we're facing after the election. And we'd appreciate your support, as we always have, and hope that we can make a going concern of this. It's always been a goal of mine to make it that way. And this feels like one of those situations where you could come out the other end saying, well, maybe this was actually for the best, because it gets you off your ass and makes you put some real effort into fundraising and professionalizing your own organization, even if it's small. So is that sufficient explanation? I think that's like 200 times longer than I really thought it needed, but maybe not. I guess I had more to say about it than I thought. So now on to the tough task later on of asking you to support the show, which is always difficult for me to do. So I'll find a way, and we'll work it out, and then I will put it on tape, and I will play it in the middle of the podcast, and then you'll know what to do. Now, there's other news concerning other people in this country, and I thought I might share some of that with you. That feels a little more natural than the last 20 minutes, and we'll go with that. Here's news that came in during the earlier segment when Greg was here that I thought I might share with you here. Just a quick news flash from the Hill. Trump cannot block grand jury subpoena for his tax returns, court rules. That sounds like good news. A federal appeals court, it's always important to see what's going on the appeals, on Wednesday ruled that President Trump cannot block enforcement of a New York grand jury subpoena for 8 years' worth of his tax returns. The ruling from a 3-judge panel for the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit affirms a federal judge's decision in August that rejected Trump's claims that the subpoena from Manhattan District Attorney Cy Vance was overly broad and issued in bad faith. So just to bring you up to speed on what's happening procedurally here, Cy Vance subpoenas 8 years of tax returns. Trump sues in federal court saying the subpoena is overly broad and issued in bad faith. Part of a Democrat plot against me for some reason, or something, Russia hoax, etc., etc. Federal judge says that's baloney. Forget about it. You have to comply with the subpoena. They say, well, we'll appeal. Fine. They appeal. They take it to the Second Circuit Court of Appeals. The Second Circuit Court of Appeals says, nah, he was right. Or she was right. I don't know who the judge was. I forget by now. But yeah, they were right at the district court. And you do have to comply with the DA's subpoena. And at this point, they may say, well, we'll appeal to the Supreme Court, or we'll appeal to, we want an en banc rehearing of the Second Circuit. I mean, I guess they could, if they're looking to delay, they'll ask for an en banc rehearing now that they've learned what those are. But just another reminder that, it would be for the best if we, let's say, didn't see Amy Coney Barrett on the Supreme Court at any point, and that we expanded the numbers of newly appointed judges on the court such that we don't get around to a situation later on where out of the blue, a 6-3 Supreme Court just says, well, we don't know what the precedent is and we don't really have anything to rely on, but screw everybody from every court below this one. We just say Cy Vance is wrong and Donald Trump is right based on nothing, and then there's nothing we can do about it. So there we are. This, by way of background, is the Manhattan DA's office, same office that last year subpoenaed Trump's accounting firm, Mazars, right, for the president's personal and business tax returns and other financial records. Trump initially challenged the subpoena. You know about that. We just discussed it. Whatever. He lost, and then he's appealed, and that's that. So no word yet, because it's brand new, in what form any appeals from the Trump camp will come, whether for a request for en banc rehearing or straight to the Supreme Court, but no decision to be made anytime soon. But on the other hand, what are we like, 20-something days from, quote-unquote, the election now, even though people are already voting. And I guess what it means is, no, Cy Vance won't get his hands on 8 years' worth of tax returns. We won't see all of Trump's tax returns before, quote-unquote, the election. We'll have to rely, apparently, on the New York Times for that. And now that Trump is out of the hospital, though not out of the woods, maybe it's time for another installment in their investigation based on the documents they've managed to get their hands on. I don't know when they plan to bring that about. Let's see. All right, I think we are caught up, maybe, unless things change during the course of the show, on where Trump stands on COVID relief, stimulus relief talks. I guess the talks are back on because he's reversed himself again on the situation. I don't know who got to him last and told him to open himself up to negotiations again, but it's probably for the best. I've mentioned the 13 restaurant employees in quarantine, although I think I'll skim that article during the break to get a little bit more info on that. Here's the talking points memo summation from right before the show about where we stand on stimulus negotiations. Let's see if I can cram that in the next minute before our break comes around. Trump suddenly walks back cancellation of stimulus talks amid unrestrained Twitter spree. Sounds like fun. Christina Cabrera writes this one for Talking Points Memo. President Donald Trump abruptly switched gears on Tuesday night after ending negotiations over a much-needed new COVID-19 relief bill earlier that day. Tweeting the House and Senate should immediately, in all caps, immediately Oh, I also missed the cue for our music here, so we'll duck out a little early. Immediately approved $25 billion for airline payroll support and $135 billion for Paycheck Protection Program for small business, Trump tweeted. Both of these will be fully paid for with unused funds from the CARES Act, and I'm not certain how they'll structure that. Have this money, that is to say that we already do. I will sign now. We'll see whether he changes his mind about that. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning show here on Netroots Radio. It occurred to me as I was attempting to do the skimming of the story that I said I was going to do over the 2-minute break and failed. I have failed in another way. I haven't mentioned at all that Stephen Miller has been now tested positive for coronavirus, which... like over at Daily Kos, we would say, well, that's unfortunate news, or even they might even say he's a guy who actually kind of deserves to come down with. I don't think there's certainly no love lost for Stephen Miller there, but I don't know. I guess that's part of the problem is I don't have any idea really what their editorial controls would allow us to say about it, and never did. Which, you know, just to return to that subject briefly for a second. I guess we could use this to clarify. What that meant was that for all the years that we've done the show, not once at any point did anyone from Daily Kos ever say, you can or can't say this on your show. So that's pretty good, quite honestly, to go that long without anybody saying anything like that. And I guess this resolution of it, I suppose if I were, you know, a full-time employee of Daily Kos and getting like a big time salary like they get, which, you know, they're not wasteful or profligate what they're spending from what I can discern, although I don't know what everybody gets. But, you know, if they had been giving that kind of support in a full-time salary, then I guess I probably would have heard about it more. But on the flip side, as they professionalized and developed their own editorial standards, those weren't things that they shared with me either. So I'd never knew, and it was probably they figured that's a good thing. One, we don't have to police anything he says. You know, we trust him to do a decent job over there with our brand name. And but since I'm not in that office and I'm not in the meetings and I'm not in their, you know, I guess in their Zoom calls or whatever it is, however they conduct their business there, I don't get to be part of those discussions, and so I don't know what's in and out of bounds, and so it was a little difficult for me to figure out as well. So anyway, the outcome is not terrible, and the good thing is nobody's mad at me, so that's good news, and I'm not kicked off of anything either, so that's fine. So but this does leave me free to say Stephen Miller can go to hell, and the sooner he finds himself incapacitated, the better. So how's that? That gives us reason to hope. You know, I'm still under moral obligation not to say Stephen Miller should absolutely shrivel and die today. So I won't. You won't catch me saying that, unless, of course, you just caught me saying that. In which case, I don't know what to tell you. I do wish that. Sorry. And now I have the freedom to do so without worrying about the repercussions for the other fine folks doing the hard work of putting Daily Kos together for your enjoyment and edification elsewhere. So, here's an interesting tidbit, by the way, that I noticed. Mike Musson tweeted to me. He learned last night that the third Kennedy-Nixon debate was conducted remotely. Kennedy was in New York and Nixon was in California. And, in those days, of course, it took, months to cross the continent. All right, they had planes, but they were separate. And they just said, we're just going to do the debate from separate locations. So, good point. This is not unprecedented. Now, it's not necessarily the case that Mike Pence is going to say, and I'd like to take the Nixon role in all of this, but, I don't know. He might. Who knows where? He might have Nixon tattooed on him somewhere. The rest of the team apparently has that. So, or at least one other member. And really, can't we generalize from that? Why not? So they've done remote debates, and hell, we're all doing everything remote now. This is ridiculous that they say that somehow this can't be done. And at the very least, there's no reason in the world why they can't move those desks further apart. The idea that they want to have that small, intimate setting because, I don't know, there was this other time when we had a debate and we had this same set. Yeah, well, now we have a pandemic and you can't have it. And you know what? You have 50 cameras. You can make this work. Everybody else in the country is doing it. So, all right. We have that they are, I don't know, we'll see whether they can get them to comply with that before tonight. Jumping back to the Talking Points memo story, trying to update the situation on where we stand with whether or not President Crazy Pants is for or against helping people who are going to lose their homes or who are starving or whose businesses have collapsed or whose jobs have been lost during this pandemic. Should we help them or should we hold them hostage until after the election? After which, of course, if he loses, I assume that means he'll come driving by and burn their houses down and say, to hell with you. The worse the situation is, and the worse I can make it over the next couple of months before Biden gets inaugurated, the more likely we'll be able to run in 2024 on Biden mishandled the economy. So what's he going to do? Right. So he tweets out this thing and says, I want to see immediately $25 billion for the airlines, which I'm not a huge fan of, but I guess they need some help. $135 billion for a paycheck protection program, which has been defrauded left and right, by the way, mostly by Republicans, as it turns out. But, okay, he says he wants to see money get out the door. If I am sent a standalone bill, capital S, capital A, standalone, capital B, bill. Oh, look at this. There's lots of capitals. Standalone bill for stimulus checks, parentheses, $1,200. No telling what the syntax is supposed to mean here. They will go out to our great people, all caps, immediately. He loves that word. He tweeted less than half an hour later, right after the one with numbers, $25 billion for airlines, etc. I am ready to sign right now. Are you listening, Nancy? Because he's working within the bounds of normalcy, you see. The president's demands were a full 180 from his Twitter announcement on Tuesday afternoon, that's yesterday afternoon, in which he stated that he had directed White House aides to cease negotiations on the stimulus bill with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi until after Election Day on November 3rd. I have asked Mitch McConnell not to delay, but instead focus full time on approving my outstanding nominee to the United States Supreme Court, Amy Coney Barrett, Trump tweeted. His about face in the middle of a head-spinning Twitter spree that saw Trump repost dozens of tweets, sprinkled with a few of his own, about a variety of the typical grievances the president has long held, the FBI Russia probe, negative media coverage, mail-in voting, and so on. So, yeah, he's whacked out of his mind. And now that he's taking drugs, he's also whacked out of his mind again. I think at this point, again, something that our newfound freedom maybe allows us to say. I think the man's brain is trapped in the tunnel of light here. And he's not really sure whether he's with it or moving on to the next plane of existence or whatever. And in moments of lucidity, grabs his phone and blathers out whatever he can make his thumbs do in between. And, who knows how much of that is steroids and who knows how much of it is his own regular crazy. And that's the danger of it. There's no way to tell. In the meantime, there's another big story, which I'm going to recommend that you find your major coverage elsewhere. I only note it for the outrage factor. It's an extremely important story. It's just not anything we can fit into today's show with the level of analysis that it really deserves. I'm talking about the New York Times story about the Department of Justice's internal investigation over the immigration policies and the family separation policies. You must have seen the story by now. It appears in the New York Times under the headline with a quote from internal memos: "We need to take away children, no matter how young," Justice Department officials said. Top department officials were a driving force, it says in the subheader, behind President Trump's child separation policy, a draft investigation report says. Now, of course, prominently featured in the photo illustrating this is Jeff Sessions. And, of course, we should all remember who or what contagion Jeff Sessions brought with him into the executive branch. The answer is Stephen Miller. And in case you were still uncomfortable with the idea of cheering his infection with COVID-19, this report will probably put it to rest. But long story short, we'll take the first couple paragraphs just to give you a taste of what's going on here if you haven't read the story. Michael Scheer, Katie Benner, Michael Schmidt teaming up for the byline. The 5 U.S. attorneys along the border with Mexico, including 3 appointed by President Trump, recoiled in May 2018 against an order to prosecute all undocumented immigrants, even if it meant separating children from their parents. They told top Justice Department officials they were deeply concerned, borrowing the phrasing, I guess, from Susan Collins, deeply concerned about the children's welfare, which is what you should be. But the Attorney General at the time, Jeff Sessions, I'm sure mindful of all of the great advice he had gotten from his former aide, Stephen Miller, made it clear what Mr. Trump wanted on a conference call later that afternoon, according to a 2-year inquiry by the Justice Department's Inspector General into Mr. Trump's zero-tolerance family separation policy. "We need to take away children," Mr. Sessions told the prosecutors, according to participants' notes. One added in shorthand, this is the shorthand, "If care about kids, don't bring them in. Won't give amnesty to people with kids." Now, I guess the not surprise element in all of this is that Rod Rosenstein, who was once considered by some, I guess, to be a possible resistance hero in all of this because he insisted on appointing Robert Mueller as special counsel for investigating the Trump-Russia questions and Trump election interference questions, I guess. But, of course, Mueller turned out to be A, no great shakes, and B, maybe, the greatest ally Trump ever had in understating what he had done. And Rosenstein not looking great for that insistence after all. Now looks a lot worse. Rod Rosenstein, then the Deputy Attorney General, went even further in a second call on this subject about a week later, telling the 5 prosecutors that it did not matter how young the children were. He said that government lawyers should not have refused to prosecute 2 cases simply because the children were barely more than infants. In other words, there were U.S. attorneys out there who were acting humanely and with some sense of humility in what they were doing, and they should stop doing that because that's what the president wanted. Those 2 cases should not have been declined. John Bash, the departing U.S. attorney in Western Texas, wrote to his staff immediately after the call. Mr. Bash had declined the cases, but Mr. Rosenstein had overruled him. Per the AG's policy, we should not be categorically declining immigration prosecutions of adults in family units because of the age of the child. The Justice Department's top officials were a driving force behind the policy that spurred the separation of thousands of families, many of them fleeing violence in Central America and seeking asylum in the United States, before Mr. Trump abandoned it amid global outrage, according to a draft report of the results of the investigation by Michael E. Horowitz, the department's inspector general. And I think you know the rest of the story, and we've heard all the details about the family separation policy and what its results have been. But this, and it deserves scrutiny, and I plan to read through the rest of the article, and maybe we'll discuss it further during the rest of the week. But in case you haven't had a chance to figure out what that one is about, I recommend it to you. It's, what difference does it make? Will Bill Barr do anything about it? No, he probably approves of both the plan and probably thinks that it's somehow politically advantageous to them to have been found out on it. But don't count on any prosecutions from all of this in this country under this administration. Look for them perhaps under the next administration, maybe, although, they hate to do that sort of thing. And by rights, the prosecution should, of course, be taking place under the International Court of Justice, but, another long shot on that front as well. All right. Other stories we did mention, Greg brought up, of course, the military quarantines. The Joint Chiefs of Staff are now forced to work in quarantine and work remotely for fear of infection with the coronavirus after the vice commandant of the Coast Guard came down with and got a positive diagnosis on COVID-19, having been apparently infected by the military attaché whose job it is to carry around what they call the nuclear football, the briefcase with all of the authorizing information that's supposed to travel with the President of the United States, even if he's a crazy orange moron, wherever he goes in case in case of attack and we need to have some sort of immediate preparations for it. And so it can happen on a moment's notice. That guy got COVID. And so, I'm sure they have another guy who's trained to take over in the case of illness or just wanting to give the other guy a day off or something. But again, the shambolic situation in our government here. I mean, it not for nothing. And I said it this way on Twitter yesterday, but for the record, you have the president hospitalized with COVID, the vice president, maybe he's got it, maybe he doesn't, I don't know. I think he's been in pretty close proximity. By some miracle, it might be the case that he doesn't have it. But you have top-level government officials, left and right, not politically left and right, but I mean all over the place, who are either infected or forced into quarantine because the chances that they're not infected are so slim because they've been at one or another of these various super spreader events that took place over the last couple of days. You have top Senate Republicans also supposed to be in isolation, but who knows whether they're going to honor any of that. The president, of course, has no interest in honoring any sort of isolation or quarantine or anything, and he's going to ignore it all, and he's going to make things 100 times worse. But top-level executive branch people, top-level legislative branch people, the top brass of the military, all forced to work remotely because the president unleashed a bioweapon bomb in the middle of all of them. If a foreign agent had done this, and many people would argue a foreign agent did do this, but if a foreign agent had really surely done this, that's what we would call a decapitation strike. Sometimes that's handled by nuclear weapons. Sometimes that's handled by tactical strike teams or bioweapons. But the idea is, can you cut off the head of the enemy? Can you take out his command and control structure? Take out the president, the commander-in-chief. Take out the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the vice president, the succession, the continuity of government, and leave the enemy's government incapacitated and unable to respond to your attack. It's, basic playbook that everybody plans for. It's just that we've never planned for the president of the United States to do it to us. That's not been in the playbook. We're supposed to do it to them, whoever the them may be. But in this case, the them didn't have to do it because our own president did it to us And of course, I don't know, we're all supposed to take it as an accident. He didn't know any better. But it's 7 months into this thing. We've been telling you every day for months now that this is how this disease operates. And he has said, no, it isn't. No, and I'm going to do it my way. And the result of it is that the Joint Chiefs of Staff are God knows where, conducting their business over God knows what remote connection. All we have left here is to hope and pray. Thoughts and prayers for the remote communications devices that they have that are supposed to be both secure and robust and untappable by foreign agents, because now the intimate and highly classified, intimate in the governmental sense, although who knows what they say to one another in private, the conversations between the Joint Chiefs of Staff from the various armed services and the President of the United States and the senior congressional leadership all have to take place over maybe secure, maybe not secure electronic communications, monitorable by who knows who. They're supposed to be closed channels and hardened and whatnot, but who knows these days? Who knows who built the equipment? Maybe it's Chinese equipment for all I know, or maybe it's manufactured elsewhere, but with a Chinese component to it that basically backdoors the conversation straight to Beijing. I don't know. Maybe they're communicating by TikTok video for all I know. I've got no reason to believe that they are, but the fact that they can't get together and have normal face-to-face direct conversation is a huge national security risk. And, one electromagnetic pulse later, we're decapitated again. So thanks for doing that to us with your carelessness, Donald J. Trump. Basically, biowarfare against the United States perpetrated by the supposed commander-in-chief of our armed forces, but we're all supposed to look at it as some sort of, I don't know what, oops, look what I did, accident. But coupled with the fact that a lot of people think that basically he's acting in some various foreign powers' interests at all times. Anyway, it is cause for alarm. All right, let's see. On another thread that we frequently tug on, I do have this story also from the New York Times, because that's what gets circulated mostly in my Twitter feed for whatever reason. Totally different story, but something we've discussed in the past, a thread we've tugged on, as I said. Judges tell Trump his officials are serving illegally. He does nothing. So that's the story. 3 high-ranking administration officials, 3, have been found by courts, actual courts of law, to be working in violation of a 1988 law, you know which one it is, that governs how a president can appoint temporary officials. First one up, Lisa Friedman, writing this story, holding a job unlawfully, she starts by saying, is not a reason to be fired in the Trump administration, right? Last month, a Montana judge ruled that the acting, where's our sound effect? We haven't lost that, right? Our acting head of the Bureau of Land Management, which, by the way, still goes by the initials of BLM, which is the source of endless confusion, and I put that in scare quotes, particularly out in the Pacific Northwest, where people are on constant alert for Antifa caravans coming into their tiny towns to take over, right? Cross that with the wildfires. When the Bureau of Land Management was out setting backfires in order to burn away underbrush before a out-of-control wildfire got there and overtook their abilities to contain it, right? This is a common firefighting practice. BLM setting backfires appears on the police radio scanners that the wacko survivalists and militia types were listening to, and they heard BLM setting fires. That was to them Black Lives Matter, and of course Antifa, because we hate them too, are out here setting fires. These are all arsons, and anytime we see anybody who is either black or wearing black, we should shoot them because freedom. So I just thought I'd point that out as untrue but problematic. But back in the other story we were reading, Last month, a Montana judge rules that the acting head of the Bureau of Land Management, which holds sway over millions of acres of federal land, and we remember that the Bundy clan was at war with these guys, right, should be removed from his position because he was performing his duties illegally. The Interior Department's response? Tweak his title. That's their favorite response to this. So they now call him like he's Prince. He's the senior official performing the duties of the acting head of the Bureau of Land Management, and therefore you have to leave us alone. No word on what the judges think of that. Since March, William Perry Pendley, who's not even like a 19th century figure. He's like a real live person now. Although, if you take a look at him, you might have questions about whether he's, live. He could use a cleaning up. William Perry Pendley is the third high-ranking administration official that the courts have found likely to be working in violation of the Federal Vacancies Reform Act, a 1998 law governing how a president may appoint temporary officials. Let me just take some small exception with the way this is phrased. I think the sentence does too much. He's the third high-ranking official that the courts have found likely to be working in violation. Courts probably, aren't going to settle for that sort of wishy-washy language in issuing their orders. The courts have found them working in violation of the Federal Vacancies Reform Act. I think the likely is anticipation of appeals where they think it's possible, particularly if there are Trump-appointed judges sitting on the appeals panels, might say, no, it isn't. We're going to stand everybody's understanding of the Federal Vacancies Reform Act on its head to save Donald Trump politically and get the policy outcome we want. And that, in the end, then you'd say, well, they say that it's not in violation. So maybe we'll just phrase it now as saying that courts have found that they're likely to be in violation. But what would a federal court is not going to be interested in issuing the opinion that maybe this is what we found. No, you're going to say what you found. You could be wrong, you could be overturned on appeal, but you don't say this might be true. You say this is what we got. Well, anyway, such findings have been bolstered by the Government Accountability Office and other agencies, but it hasn't been a court up till this point. In each case, the administration has responded with defiance. We depend on an administration's willingness to comply with the law, including judicial orders, findings of independent agencies, and congressional demands for information, said Kathleen Clark, a government ethics expert at Washington University in St. Louis. The Trump administration discovered it had a secret superpower, which was that it could fail to comply basically without consequences. If the trend continues into a second term for President Trump, which you should avoid at all costs, government watchdogs said it could entangle policies on everything from immigration to land management in lengthy legal tussles. Mr. Trump's recent hospitalization after testing positive for the coronavirus moved the question of just who's in charge of the government front and center. It's kind of important to know. Farther down the leadership chain, the president's penchant for filling high-level jobs without Senate confirmation was causing confusion long before the coronavirus pandemic. Confirmation hearings in the Senate are really important, said Peter Jenkins, senior counsel for the Public Employees of Environmental Responsibility. For environmental responsibility. Did I say of? If they pass and get enough votes, it means they're mainstream enough to satisfy both sides, Mr. Jenkins said, but consistently bypassing the law, that doesn't really mean that anymore now without the filibuster, but okay. You get, if they bypass the law, you get lower level, unqualified, or fringe characters running the bureaus. Yes. The employee morale suffers, the performance of the agencies decline, and the resources suffer. There's much more, of course, to the story, but you get the gist of it, and we are running low on time here. So it's, one, about time to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. And two, magically, I don't know how this one evaded my pocket, but I think we should take note of the fact that yesterday in St. Louis, since it came up, the gun nuts, what was their names? The McCloskeys, right? In St. Louis, those are the two right-wing weirdos, the couple who appeared outside on the front porch of their crazy-looking, out-of-place mansion and threatened Black Lives Matter demonstrators on their way past the house, threatened them with their guns, and then, of course, the president said, yeah, we should have them speak at the Republican National Convention, and they did it. And anyway, it turns out that they've been indicted for not only brandishing their weapons in public and endangering the lives of the protesters unduly, but also for evidence tampering, which I still have yet to see the details of that. They, of course, came out outraged that they were being indicted and that the protesters they were threatening with weapons weren't being indicted, because those are bad people too, somehow, in their view. But we'll see what comes of this one. I guess now you can just add it to the total number of people who have appeared under the Republican National Committee's umbrella that have been indicted or come down with coronavirus, or both. Just an interesting development that I thought I would share with you on the way out the door. We'll be back for a show tomorrow and Friday, of course. Next up, Justice Putnam, who always draws the tough task here, but approaches it with a smile every day, we allege. That's the case. Coming up with all the rest of the news and analysis next.
From netrootsradio.com, you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning
with David Waldman.
All right, let's see what kind of things he's got on tap. Let's look down at the end here. Oh, look at this. Over in Greece, police officers around Athens apparently getting set to deploy as the leadership of the extreme right group Golden Dawn faces a landmark criminal trial verdict. It's happening everywhere.